If Clint wanted to cast me, then I wasn't about to question his judgment.
He didn't whisper. He didn't sugarcoat. Donald Sutherland just said it, cold, sharp, and unmistakably final. And once he felt it, he didn't forget.
My son has been doing drugs for a year and I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. You know, and of course they should know it. Everybody knows it.
For over 60 years, Donald Sutherland played rebels, outcasts, and haunted men. But behind the camera, it was something else entirely. He didn't act. He hunted the truth. And if someone wasn't pulling their weight, he let the world know. One actor at a time, one feud at a time. Quiet explosions, no tabloid, no tantrum, just a glare, a silence, or a line that could split stone. Sutherland didn't hate often, but when he did, it landed like a slap across the room. Kelly's heroes, Clute, M-A-S-H, space, cowboys. The man never chased fame, but on set, he demanded gravity, discipline, focus. And when he didn't get it, he made sure nobody forgot. Because with Donald Sutherland, hate didn't look like yelling, it looked like silence, or worse, dismissal.
If you say you've nailed it, you probably haven't. You know, you don't have that result. And even when you see the dailies, it doesn't make any difference.
He worked with hundreds, but only a few ever got under his skin and stayed there. The ones who crossed a line, who broke the craft, or just rubbed him the wrong way. Here are the 6 actors Sutherland couldn't stand, on screen, off screen, or ever again, and why nothing ever fixed it. Number 1. Clint Eastwood. Some actors you respect from a distance. Clint Eastwood was one Donald Sutherland respected until they worked together. On the set of Kelly's Heroes, Sutherland didn't find the easy camaraderie or shared creative energy he expected. Eastwood was already a rising Hollywood icon, quiet, in control, and extremely deliberate. But what some called discipline, Sutherland felt, was a wall, a barrier to collaboration. Sutherland once described the experience as shut out of a room with no windows. That wasn't petty jealousy. Sutherland thrived on energy between actors, on sparks that make scenes come alive. With Eastwood, that spark never ignited. Eastwood's famously laconic style, his tight-lipped professionalism, felt like a kind of dismissal, and that stuck with Sutherland. Eastwood had his own rhythm. He didn't rehearse endlessly. He didn't invite open dialogue. If a scene was fine in one take, he'd move on. For Sutherland, who built his performances like a craftsman, that pace felt almost careless. There's working fast, Sutherland once said, and then there's not working together at all. This wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was 2 completely different schools of acting colliding. Eastwood came from the trust your gut and shoot tradition. Sutherland came from the tear it apart and rebuild philosophy. And when those worlds met, the space between them became a cold void. On Kelly's Heroes, insiders noticed Sutherland keeping his distance during downtime. No jokes, no shared meals, no bonding. It wasn't open hostility, it was the absence of connection. And in Hollywood, sometimes that's even louder. One crew member reportedly recalled Sutherland saying, "Clint's not a bad man, he's just not there with you." Still, Sutherland kept it professional. He delivered his performance, hit his marks, and stayed in character. But there was no mistaking the undercurrent. For him, acting was a dance. For Eastwood, it was a job to get done. And when the music's missing, the dance feels like marching. After filming, Sutherland never pursued another project with Eastwood. He didn't criticize him publicly, but in interviews about Kelly's Heroes, there was always a pause, a hitch before the answer. Eastwood likely saw no feud. His method had worked for decades. But for Sutherland, the memory stayed, not as anger, but as the quiet certainty that some actors will never meet you halfway. In Hollywood, it's not always about clashes or arguments. Sometimes it's simply the absence of a bridge. Sutherland built his career on connection, Eastwood on control. On Kelly's Heroes, those worlds never touched, and for Sutherland, that was reason enough to walk away. Number 2. Elliott Gould. Some on-screen pairings look perfect on paper, but reality doesn't always match the pitch. Elliott Gould and Donald Sutherland were 2 of the most memorable faces in MASH, a film that redefined war movies with wit, irreverence, and razor-sharp satire. But behind the scenes, their dynamic wasn't as effortless as it appeared. From day one, Gould's style was free-flowing, improvisational, and unpredictable. He was known for breaking script, adding quirks, and chasing a moment if he felt it. For some actors, that spontaneity was thrilling. For Sutherland, methodical, precise, and deeply committed to staying in character, it could be maddening. Sutherland once remarked that working with Gould could feel like trying to hit a moving target in the dark. To Sutherland, acting was like architecture, plans, foundations, structure. Gould preferred jazz, unrehearsed, winding, and sometimes off-key. When those approaches collided, it was less a duet and more a tug-of-war over the tone of a scene. Sutherland reportedly kept his composure on set, but privately, he voiced frustration over the lack of predictability in Gould's performance. One day, after multiple takes went sideways due to improvisation, a heated exchange was overheard. Sutherland walked off the soundstage for several minutes before returning. He later told an interviewer, "Elliott has a genius for chaos. Sometimes that chaos works. Sometimes it swallows the scene whole." Despite the friction, both delivered standout performances in MASH. But the production carried a quiet tension. They weren't shouting or feuding, it was a professional disconnection. Gould's loose rhythm simply didn't mesh with Sutherland's disciplined, detail-driven process. During downtime, they rarely spent time together. Gould gravitated toward castmates who thrived on long unstructured conversations. Sutherland often retreated to a quiet corner to read, review notes, or speak with the director. Even in group settings, there was a polite distance, like two radio stations broadcasting on different frequencies. One former crew member recalled Sutherland summing it up simply, "We were telling the same story, but from different worlds." After filming, they went their separate ways. Rumours suggested they might reunite on another project, but it never happened. Looking back, the contrast explains it all. Gould's unpredictability was his gift, and his gamble. Sutherland's steadiness was his anchor, and his guardrail. Together they created an unforgettable pairing, but the road to get there was rockier than the final cut revealed. In the end, there was no public fight, just a quiet understanding that they worked best apart. Sometimes in Hollywood, that's as close as you get to closure. Number 3. Richard Gere. Donald Sutherland believed in discipline. Not flash, not charm, discipline. Richard Gere had the fame. He had the headlines. He had the polished movie star glow. But to Sutherland, none of it mattered if the work didn't stand on its own. Gere wasn't disliked for his lifestyle or his off-screen choices. He was disliked for something simpler. He didn't feel grounded. Confidence is fine. Arrogance ruins the work. Sutherland rarely spoke about Gere in public, but those who worked alongside them could read the temperature. To Sutherland, Gere was style first, substance second. He could hit his marks, deliver the lines, and still leave nothing behind. What really set the tone wasn't a shouting match or a clash of egos. It was the atmosphere on A Time to Kill. From day one, Sutherland felt a gap. Gere worked in his own lane, self-contained, private, and untouchable. There were no long rehearsals together, no shared breakdown of the scenes, just two men arriving at the same point from entirely different roads. In a later interview, Sutherland didn't name names, but the meaning was clear. Some actors build the scene with you, others build the scene for themselves. You can always tell which is which. That was the unspoken divide. Gere approached the work like a solo act. Sutherland believed in ensemble truth, feeding off the other actor's energy. With Gere, the energy loop never closed. They never fought, but they never met either. Not really. A crew member recalled years later. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't grudge. It was simply a lack of connection. And in Sutherland's world, no connection meant no trust. The most telling detail came after the shoot wrapped. When asked about working with Gere, Sutherland gave a polite smile and moved on. No praise, no criticism, just absence. He never campaigned to avoid Gere. He never told studios not to pair them again. He simply never sought it out. Because for Donald Sutherland, Acting wasn't just about being in the same frame, it was about meeting in the middle, holding the weight of the scene together. And with Gere, he felt like he was holding it alone. In the end, Sutherland didn't blacklist him. He didn't tell stories about him. He just stepped around him. Because in Donald Sutherland's world, a performance wasn't judged by how good it looked, but by how deeply it stayed. And with Gere, it never stayed at all. Number 4. Tommy Lee Jones. It didn't take long for Donald Sutherland to notice. On the Space Cowboys set, whenever Tommy Lee Jones entered a room, the air shifted. Conversations got shorter, movements got sharper. It was as if the whole place leaned in his direction. Sutherland respected presence, he had his own, but Jones's presence was different. It didn't invite, it claimed. During filming, that difference played out in small, telling ways. Jones liked things quick, set the shot, roll the camera, move on. Sutherland preferred a little exploration before the take, testing a line, adjusting a beat, letting the scene breathe. Jones saw that as delay. Sutherland saw it as craft. The tension stayed under the surface until one afternoon during a scene reset. Sutherland suggested a minor change in blocking, something to give the dialogue more space. Jones listened for a few seconds, nodded once, then walked away without saying a word. You can work with anyone. The question is, will they work with you? Sutherland would say later. From that point on, they worked side by side without ever really working together. Between takes, Sutherland kept to himself, running lines or speaking with the crew. Jones stayed in his own orbit, speaking when necessary, never more. People close to the shoot noticed the silence. Not hostility, just a kind of professional disengagement. One crew member described it like this: "When Tommy's in a scene, the scene belongs to him, even if the script says otherwise." For Sutherland, that approach drained the give and take that made a scene live. Acting, to him, was about the energy passing between people. When that loop closed, magic happened. When it didn't, the work felt hollow, no matter how strong the performance looked on camera. "The best scenes are shared," Sutherland once told a journalist. "If you're just holding the frame by yourself, you're missing half of it." Jones wasn't being malicious. That was simply his method: hold the center, lock the focus, drive the moment home. And it had worked for him for decades, but for Sutherland, it left no room to move. The two never clashed openly, no arguments leaked to the press. Still, after Space Cowboys, they never worked together again. It was an unspoken decision. In the end, Sutherland didn't dislike Jones as a person, he disliked the way Jones worked. One built the scene like a bridge, meeting in the middle. The other planted his feet and made you come to him. And some distances, once set, never close. Number 5. Kiefer Sutherland. Some tensions start on set. This one started at home. Donald Sutherland rarely spoke about his personal life in interviews, but when it came to his son, Kiefer, the gaps were noticeable. Long stretches without mention, careful wording when the topic came up, and silences that suggested a story left untold. Kiefer once said in an interview, "I wasn't raised by Donald." That sentence alone painted the picture. Two lives running on separate tracks. Donald chasing film sets across continents. Kiefer building his career without leaning on his father's name. When they finally worked together, it wasn't in a warm family drama. It was in Forsaken, a western about a father and son in conflict. The casting felt almost too fitting. On set, the tension wasn't hostile, just reserved. They stepped around each other like people wary of reopening old wounds. Crew members noticed the absence of casual interaction, no shared stories, no leaning in to check lines together. "Some relationships you warm up, others you keep at room temperature," one crew member remarked. One quiet moment summed it up. Between takes, Kiefer stood at the edge of the set, cigarette in hand, staring toward the horizon. Donald walked past, nodded once, and kept going. No words, no smile, just two professionals in the same space, each in their own lane. In later interviews, Donald praised Kiefer's work ethic, but sidestepped questions about their bond. When pressed, he would pivot to talking about the project instead. "Work is work, family is family. Sometimes they meet, sometimes they don't, he once said. For Kiefer, the distance may have been motivation. He forged his own path, headlining films and leading 24 to global success without trading on his father's career. But the absence of public warmth between them became part of their shared story. Two men with the same last name, moving in parallel, rarely intersecting. Those who worked with them both say there was no big fight, no defining argument, just a steady, quiet distance neither seemed eager to close. When Forsaken wrapped, they shook hands on set. The gesture was polite and measured, the kind you might see between colleagues who'd worked well enough together. But from a father and son, it felt light. The film didn't change their relationship. It didn't heal or harm. It simply confirmed what was already there. And for Donald and Kiefer Sutherland, that space never went away. Number 6. Jane Fonda. When Donald Sutherland met Jane Fonda on the set of Clute in 1970, it wasn't just a professional partnership, it was personal. They began a relationship during production, and for a while it was intense. Both were politically outspoken, drawn to challenging roles, and at the height of their craft. But the same fire that made them magnetic on screen burned hot off it, and eventually burned out. During the shoot, their chemistry was undeniable. Scenes between them had an edge, an undercurrent that felt real. Yet behind the camera, their relationship was already strained. Fonda's activism drew constant attention. Sutherland admired her passion, but felt overwhelmed by the noise surrounding her. With Jane, there's never a quiet moment, Sutherland once admitted. When they split, Clute was still filming. They had to finish their scenes together, now with a distance that hadn't been there before. Conversations were brief, rehearsals shorter. One crew member recalled, "They weren't fighting, they were holding back, like they both knew the words but didn't want to say them." After wrapping, they went separate ways and never worked together again. Interviewers occasionally brought up her name, but Sutherland kept his comments to polite praise, avoiding personal details. In one rare candid remark, Sutherland called the experience emotionally violent. He didn't elaborate, but the choice of words spoke volumes. "Some people leave you better, some people leave you empty, and sometimes it's both at once," he said years later. Fonda would go on to write openly about her life, while Sutherland kept this chapter sealed. That silence became part of the story, an unspoken acknowledgement that some memories weren't worth revisiting. Even decades later, when Clute appeared in retrospectives, critics noted how lived-in their performances felt. Few outside the set knew just how close those emotions were to the truth. The restrained looks, the pauses between lines, they weren't all acting. The relationship didn't end in scandal or public arguments. It ended in a deliberate choice to step away, to keep distance rather than risk reopening old wounds. For Sutherland, the memory wasn't bitterness. It was a reminder that the strongest on-screen partnerships can't always survive off-screen realities. Some doors close with a slam. This one closed quietly. Donald Sutherland never made a scene. No shouting, no public takedowns, just a glance, a pause, and a door that stayed shut. Some actors lost his trust by being unprepared, others by taking too much space, but these 6, they broke something harder to fix, respect. And once that was gone, there were no second chances. You weren't just out of the project, you were out of his orbit. Which other names do you think were on his unspoken list? Drop your guesses in the comments, and be here for the next deep dive into Hollywood's quiet rifts. Because in Donald Sutherland's world, talent got you noticed, but trust kept you beside him.